Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. If you've got a photo question, you should know what to do by now. You just go to askdavidbergman.com and submit that form right there on the site. I just might pick your question and answer here on a future show. Today's question was sent in by John G, and he wants to know, I have a prospective client who can only get photos taken in the middle of the day. How can I get a good portrait in that light? Thanks, John, for sending that question, and it's a good one, and I've got a few tips that might help you out. So you might think that middle of the day is a great time to take pictures of people. There's plenty of light when the sun is out, right? So what's the problem? Well, making a pleasing portrait isn't just about the quantity of light, but also the quality. Whether it's hard light or soft light, and also the direction that light is coming from, both of those are important factors that affect the quality of your final images. First, let's talk about hard and soft light. The larger the light is in relation to the subject, the softer the light is going to be. It's not the absolute size of the light, it's relative to the subject. If you take a small light source and move it closer, it's going to appear to get bigger in relation to the subject. Of course, the opposite is also true. A large light source moved further away is going to appear to be smaller. The sun, of course, is the largest object in our solar system. It's a very large light source, but it's also 93 million miles away from us. So it looks tiny from our perspective. That means it creates very hard light. Hard light gives us hard shadows and shows more texture. Soft light, on the other hand, fills in those shadows and makes things look like skin look much smoother. Now, direction is also important. At sunrise or sunset, the sun is very low in the sky. It's easier to work with that angle when photographing people because you can have the face lit entirely by the sun from that direction. In the middle of the day, on most of the planet at least, the sun is high overhead. That light hits the top of the head first and doesn't really get in to light up the eyes, which are recessed back in the front of our faces. It creates harsh shadows and just doesn't look that good. Yesterday, I took Lisa onto the roof of my studio building to demonstrate. I was using my Canon R5 with the 2870 f2 lens. It was the middle of the day and the sun was high overhead. We did have some shadows on the roof because we're surrounded by buildings here in New York City, but I put her in the sun to show what it would look like. Without any modification, here's the harsh midday sun beating down onto Lisa's face. It's just not a good look for anybody. Now, if it was an overcast day, the light would be a bit nicer. Still not ideal, but clouds soften the light because it spreads the rays out in all directions. Now, John said he has to shoot in the middle of the day, and let's assume it's not cloudy. There still are a few things that he can do. The first thing I would try to do is find open shade. That's an area that's not being lit directly by the sun. I did a video during the pandemic about making studio quality headshots in the open shade of a typical car garage. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry about the beard that I was trying to grow out in quarantine and the hair was a bit out of control. None of that worked at all, and I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But the other takeaway from that video is that open shade can be a really nice way to shoot, especially if you're surrounded by bright reflective surfaces because they help to fill in the shadows. However, if you're stuck in the sunlight, I'd also try to look around at all of the angles. It's rare that the sun is exactly overhead. Of course it happens, but it's more likely that the sun is a bit more one direction than the other. The goal is to have even light across your subject's face instead of those high contrast shadows from the direct sunlight. Now on the roof, all I had to do was turn Lisa around the other direction, and I was able to get a better angle to make a simple portrait. Now, if that's not an option, either because the sun is directly overhead, or maybe you have a particular background that you want, so you can't move your subject, there are still other options. You're just going to need some gear at this point. The first thing you should do is block some of that nasty light. You can use something as simple as a pop-up reflector. I put mine on a stand using the Westcott Illuminator arm and just raised it up over Lisa's head to block the light from hitting her directly. The one I'm using has white translucent fabric that blocks out about a stop of light, but it's up to you how much you want to block. I still like having some sunlight coming through, especially if I'm not adding in any of my own light. Now in a pinch, this works great. It's an inexpensive way to shoot in midday sunlight. It's almost the same as having clouds in the sky because it cuts down those shadows, spreads out the light, and blocks the harsh, hard light from hitting your subject directly. So I've softened the light, but I haven't changed the direction. It's still coming from overhead, even though we're getting some bounce from other surfaces around the roof there. Now, if you want, you could then add in another reflector underneath to fill in the shadows even more. I used the Manfrotto Halo. That's the reflector I travel with because it collapses into a very small bag that fits anywhere. This photo was a bit of a challenge to do by myself and is much easier if you have someone else to hold the reflector or just use another stand. But it is doable, and I made a couple images that way to show the quality of light I was getting on Lisa's face, and it looks pretty good. Now there is one more step beyond this. Once you've blocked the harsh overhead light, you can go ahead and add in flash. I added in here my Westcott FJ200 with the Octa-S small softbox and the FJ-X3 M wireless transmitter. That setup is super portable and was pretty easy to bring up on the roof. By adding in flash, I can lower my ambient light exposure and bring some color into that background sky. If you're just using reflectors, you can't raise the light on your subject enough to be able to darken your background. Also, I can place the flash at any angle I want. So if I want classic Rembrandt-style lighting from the side or a clamshell lighting, whatever I want to do, it's easy for me to do in this situation. You can see the difference between these two frames, one with the flash and one without. It's like night and day. And of course, you can use multiple strobes if you want to really create a more complex portrait. I kept it pretty simple for this shoot, but you could even add the reflector underneath to give some classic fashion fill light. Again, this would be easier with another pair of hands, and I couldn't quite get the angle I wanted, but I shot one frame to show how pretty the light could actually be with this very easy setup. So John, it's absolutely possible to make beautiful portraits in the middle of the day, even when you have nasty overhead sunlight. Either place your subject in the shade, angle them for the best light, or use modifiers and maybe even flash to create the light that you want instead of being stuck with the light that you have. Hope that helps. How do you all deal with harsh midday sun? Let me know down in the comments below. Remember, I'm still hosting my Shoot from the Pit live concert photography workshops around the world. Every date this year, 2023, is sold out, but go to shootfromthepit.com, get on the free email list, and you'll be the first to know when new workshops are announced. Remember, you can send in your own photo questions for this show by going to askdavidbergman.com and filling out that form. If you're not already a subscriber to the Adorama YouTube channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button down below and hit that little bell icon. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you'll come back next time when I'll have another question to answer right here on Ask David Bergman.